This is ContraZoom.
映画のあれこれについて触れるポッドキャストです。
I'm your host, Dakota Arsenault, and today's episode is presented by Aesthetic Magazine. On today's episode, we are continuing our celebration of cinema from around the world. 2 episodes ago, on part 1, we looked at Japanese cinema, specifically live-action films. From legendary directors like Akira Kurosawa, Yasujiro Ozu, and Hirokazu Koreeda, and movies like Godzilla, Ringu, and Seven Samurai. Japan also has an incredibly long and rich tradition in animation. The first full-length animated movie was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, produced by Disney and released in 1937. Japan produced their first full-length animated movie just 8 years later with the World War II propaganda film Momotaro: Sacred Sailors. Since then, they have become leaders in the industry, making some of the most beloved and influential animated movies of all time. Once again, joining me on this journey as my far more experienced co-pilot is Naomi Wada Platt, who previously appeared on episode 130, imagineNATIVE, and 141, celebrating Japanese cinema live action. She is a YouTuber that specializes in cultural videos in both English and Japanese. Thank you so much for joining me again today, Naomi.
Thank you so much for having me again. I was really looking forward to this episode.
Well, good. Now, we talked in the last episode about how it must have been difficult to talk about all the great movies that Japan has given the world without mentioning their contribution to animation. Are you relieved we can talk about that today?
Finally, yes.
Good. I'm glad you are excited. I'm excited too. But I gotta know, growing up, what were your entrance points? Was it Studio Ghibli, like a lot of the world, or were there other ones too that you were fascinated by?
So, in Japan, you basically grow up watching Ghibli. I remember watching it on TV with my family members, and I remember going to theaters to watch Spirited Away, Sento Chihiro no Kamikakushi. So I grew up with that. But I got into like television animation when I was in elementary school, like when I was a teenager. So ever since that, like animation's been my thing. So I'm really excited to talk about things that I've been passionate for over a decade. So yeah.
Well, that's good. When you're in Japan, is it sort of similar to here in North America where like you have Saturday morning cartoons? Do they do that over there?
It's a thing in Japan. Pretty much every weekday you have evening time allocated for animation, and on weekends in the morning it's for like kids, and every day around nighttime there are more mature animation for adults or young adults. So it's definitely a thing. It's similar to North America, yeah.
That's good. That's good to hear. Now, I think it's, best we kind of start this conversation at the peak of the mountain, and that, of course, is the aforementioned Studio Ghibli. The studio was started in 1985 by directors Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata, who are already very established in their fields, as they joined up with producer Toshio Suzuki. Over the course of their 35-year history, they've released 22 movies directed by 7 different people. Of course, it all comes back to 2 of the founders who have produced the most profound impact on the studio. Miyazaki has directed 9, while Takahata, who sadly passed away in 2018 at the age of 82, directed 5 of the releases. We'll start with the figurehead of the company, Miyazaki, who has become almost an unofficial mascot of the company, whose image and personality are as well known as directors not known for the animation medium. He has retired several times, each time swearing that this time is for real. He is once again returning from his final retirement to work on the upcoming release, How Do You Live? Miyazaki's work often is more fantastical than his cohorts, as he populates his films with unique imaginary creatures, and overall, his films are more flights of fancy. I'll start out by asking, what sets apart Ghibli's work from other studios, and what makes Miyazaki unique to you?
It's just his imagination and dedication to his narratives. It's so dynamic, and he's so dedicated creating each and every film and their world, and it's so meticulous, and you just get sucked into it, and you just realize even though those films are separate entities, it's creation of Miyazaki, and once you get the gist of his essence, you are just hooked on it.
I found for me, I've now watched 4 of his films, 5, but 4 official Ghibli ones, that he's able to work in this this style that is, geared more for children, but he doesn't treat them as children. He very much treats them like any other movie going audience. I find that very unique. He does not talk down to the people that are paying to basically watch his films. And I think that's absolutely fascinating because I think, if you're talking about a director that's making cute and cuddly creatures and, everyone can fly and everyone has magic powers and stuff like that, you're very much expecting a very childish film. But the opposite is true. There's some heavier themes going on behind the scenes in treating the children as people that can control their own destiny and things like that. So I think that was quite fascinating for me to sort of learn as I was watching his movies.
That is very true. Yeah, he just presents the world as it is, not, watering it down or, like you said, talking it down to like kids. That is so very true.
Like previously, I had watched The Wind Rises. That's the only Miyazaki film I had seen prior to doing preparation for this episode. But I've since watched My Neighbor Totoro, Porco Rosso, Spirited Away, and then also Lupin the Third, his very first movie they directed that was pre-Studio Ghibli. And especially with Totoro, that's one that's probably the most famous. You see the plushies everywhere of Totoro and his little friends and things like that. So it's obviously super well known. And it's, about these two young girls trying to there isn't even really much of a plot. It's just sort of discovering that there is this forest troll that lives next to the house where they live. And that's basically the gist of the plot. There really isn't a lot going on there. But one thing I was reading about afterwards is, you've got these two very young children that are basically running around the countryside of Japan as they're trying to find their dad and stuff like that. And later one of the girls gets separated and things like that. And all throughout the different scenes, you see shrines on the side of the road, and they mentioned it once at the beginning that people pray to them and stuff like that. But I was reading afterwards that they're specifically shrines that look over children. So it's a subconscious way of letting the audience know that the children were never in any real danger, and they're not. Like the whole movie, they encounter some interesting creatures and things like that, but they're never in any sort of danger. And, that was something where I was watching it with having know nothing about it. I'm like, ooh, is this cat bus gonna steal them away, or is Totoro and his trolls gonna do something? Or are they gonna put a curse on them? But no, everything is so safe, and so it's almost like upends your expectations because you're watching and you're just like, I don't believe this. Something bad is about to happen. Maybe that's North American film sensibility where everything goes wrong, sort of thing. But I found that very fascinating.
Oh. That's very true. But there are actually some theories of Totoro that it's about Satsuki, the big sister, like actually dying, because like at one point their shadows kind of disappear. So people are like, oh, it's like the world of death, like they're in afterlife, blah blah blah. So there are some elements that people can look into it and kind of go haywire. But yeah, but I agree with the fact like that you are expecting, like, the kids are safe and it's like no harm's done, but you get this like kind of wondrous fantasy related, like, oh, what's gonna happen next? And I think Miyazaki just nails the balance of being kind of curious and having this sense of like, I don't know what's gonna happen, this unknownness, and then kind of blends that into this reality, which is not really reality, but he's really good at balancing that whole element.
Mm-hmm. And I think the one I was most surprised with was Spirited Away. That was, I just fell head over heels for that one. The way he was sort of building this entire world of this quasi afterlife, but also not really. It's also just where all the fantastic creatures sort of gather. And I don't know if it's supposed to be that way, but there was some creatures that look sort of similar to Totoro in Spirited Away. So it just makes me think that there's some sort of connection there, spiritual connection, if you will.
Oh, that's a good one. But no, people look into that and like they have their own conspiracy theories of, oh, this creature's from Totoro, this creature's from this movie, so it's so connected, blah, blah, blah. I love the conversations like that.
Do you have any personal favorite Miyazakis?
Spirited Away, Sento Chihiro no Kamikakushi. The music is just phenomenal. When I watched it in theater in Japan, I think I was, 10 or something, and I was taking piano lessons, and I begged my teachers to practice all the soundtrack from Spirited Away. So I actually can play the soundtrack, the music, the scores. I love the music, and artwork is great. And Chihiro, like, she was my age at that time. So, and I've experienced going through like moving and leaving your old school and going into new schools. So it's just I grew up with that thing. And in high school, my high school did a school trip to Taiwan, and we went to the city called Kyuhun, which Miyazaki based the city model of Spirited Away. So I was just like, I'm in the world of Spirited Away. My fangirl moment has peaked. Like, this is the moment. So it's a special movie for me.
Nice. I notice, with all the Ghibli films, but specifically with the Miyazaki ones, there seems to be such an intense focus on food as well, where they make it look as realistic as possible, as appetizing as possible. And I don't think I've seen that, other than maybe something like Ratatouille, where food is so essential to the plot. You don't really get that with most animated films from anywhere in this world, this sort of care of detail, having the steam coming up from the dishes and like seeing water and things like that, the way it all sort of glistens off of the food. And that really, I'm not gonna lie, almost every time I watched a Ghibli film, I was like, oh, I'm kind of hungry right now.
I'm sure Ghibli was doing that intentionally, and their website in Japan that's like, oh, how to recreate these dishes that you see in Ghibli films. So I should send you that link.
Oh, please do. Yeah, that would be great. And I think I also want to touch on a little bit about the artwork style as well. There's a bit of a visual similarity between all the films by the different directors that I have seen, but I think they're all still slightly unique in their own way. And for Miyazaki, it almost reminds me of like Monet paintings, where you've got this like beautiful still backdrop, the way the clouds sort of hang in the sky and the hills and all that sort of stuff. And then it's just the action in the foreground that really is animated. And I think it adds a real nice stillness to it, to this beauty. And it also, you really can tell the care that they put into actually animate it. Probably, Pixar is like just the easy one to kind of go back to, where their movies now look just so flawless. And that's great. That's a great style of animation where they're able to make it almost photorealistic, but there isn't any sort of real life behind it. And you actually feel the life and the emotion that goes into Miyazaki's films. I don't know how hands-on he is with the actual animation process. I believe he is. I don't know if you're able to sort of speak to the artwork style or not.
I just know that he's just been drawing the whole time. And he's done many television animation as well. And when I go back to those shows, I see the continuation of the art style. And the animation that he did, television animation series that he did, it's mostly towards kids. So sometimes the backgrounds are not as detailed as Studio Ghibli films, but he's known for just keep on drawing, and really quick, and just really being good at it. If that makes sense. That's all the information that I could get from websites talking about his techniques and everything. But he was influenced by Impressionism. So you're right about Monet, kind of reminding Monet and everything.
Yeah, you can absolutely see that sort of style that's very clear in his work. Now, I suppose we should move on to the other big name from Studio Ghibli, and that's Isao Takahata, whose work is much more grounded in reality, and I would almost classify his films as ones that don't need to be animated, but he chooses to do so to highlight the beauty of everyday life. If Miyazaki is sort of Ghibli's sense of wonder and excitement, would you call Takahata the soul of the company?
Yeah, whenever people talk about Miyazaki and Takahata, people say, Takahata is known for his realistic depiction, realism, grounded, and Miyazaki is really romantic and fantasy. And I definitely do see your point. And the fact that he's so realistic, yet he made those animation films kind of tell his passion and love for the medium called animation.
Yeah, I've seen 3 of his films, and obviously I think the big one that was one of the real launch pads for the company is Grave of the Fireflies, and this is a movie that for the longest time I've basically been told this is one of the saddest movies ever. Sad, so it's so sad. I'll never watch it again. It's just so sad, and so because of that, I tried to shy away from learning what it's about. I had some idea, when you say a sad movie that takes place in Japan, I automatically assume it has something to do with the war. And of course it does. And so it was nice to go into that movie basically as blind as possible. And while I agree it was very sad, but I don't think it was maybe the saddest movie I've ever seen. But it's funny. I was recounting the plot to my wife, and I'm just explaining to her. She's like, "Oh my God, that sounds so sad." But this is what I mean, the type of movie that like Grave of the Fireflies did not need to be animated. You could make that movie live action very easily. And I could definitely see something like that being made. But the fact that it is animated, it almost takes away some of the sadness and help inject some optimism into it, even though this is a situation where there is almost no optimism present.
That's an interesting point. Like, for me, someone who grew up with animation and loving them, I've never questioned like, oh, this doesn't, like, why does this have to be animated? Because it's just a medium that people choose, right? Some people choose music, some people choose literature, some people choose, I don't know, spoken words to convey their emotions or visions. So for me, like, hearing that is kind of making me learn more about the differences between animation and live action. But the reason that this movie works so and it's so emotional is because one of the aspects is animation, because when you see live action, you kind of get surrounded by the whole notion of like, oh, this is filming, like people made this set and people said, okay, action, like this is starting right now. But animation is just, it's whole continuation. It's creation of people, but there's no clear end. Oh, obviously there's a start and there's an end, but you get to do whatever within that continuation with animation. So for me, Grave of Fireflies is just, for me, it's the saddest movie because it's animation and you just see all the emotions and all the facial features and backgrounds that people created together, and it's just sad. And another reason that it is the saddest movie for me is because it's set in Kobe, which is my hometown, and the station where the brothers just I don't want to spoil it, but is the station that I used every day when I was commuting in high school. And so I actually haven't watched that movie till I moved to Toronto. So I watched it with my friends and I was crying the whole time because it's like, oh my God, this happened in Kobe way back when. And I used the station every single day, and it's not, the station's completely renovated and different, but this happened, like something as tragic as this happened in the town that I know so much. That I was just like bawling my ass out. And now I'm like, remembering the film, I'm kind of getting emotional right now. So thank you for trying to make me cry.
Sorry.
But for me, it's the saddest movie for that reason.
I find some of the films, specifically Grave of the Fireflies and maybe Porco Rosso being another one, where the politics of the studio I find are interesting because you can't really pin anything down on. With Grave of the Fireflies, It's taking place during the war, and this young brother and sister, their father is in the Japanese Navy, and they talk about that, and the son looks up to his dad to go out there and to defeat the enemy. And obviously what we kind of know of, Japan's involvement with some of the other countries, it gets a little bit muddied. And then at the end of it, the end of the movie, the armistice happens, that the unconditional surrender, and the brother is absolutely devastated, not just because of the idea that he probably lost his father, which later he finds out he probably did, but that Japan lost. It's sort of this infallible country to him in the sense of pride and patriotism, whereas the other citizens in the bank seem pretty nonplussed about the situation at all. They don't even really care. It doesn't seem to really register. So like trying to unlock what the politics of the film and what it all means, I found, was a bit interesting because I think it's purposely kept kind of muddied. So that way they're both making a statement and at the same time not really making a statement. I found that sort of similar with Porco Rosso as well, because, he's fighting against fascists and not wanting to join the military, even though they're kind of perceived as the good guys. So all of it was just found very interesting. Is that something that's sort of discussed around the Ghibli movies?
So later in his career, Miyazaki went anti-nuclear power plant or just anti-nuclear weapons. But until then, he definitely had some messages that he wanted to convey. But in Japan, it's kind of taboo to talk about politics through your work, unless you are a professor or just a writer on those topics. Like, if you're a musician and start speaking like, I'm against war, you will get criticized really harshly. Things are changing a bit, but Miyazaki's time, it definitely wasn't. So I assume that's the reason that he tried to make it as non-confrontational. But now the studio's just like, yep, anti-nuclear war, anti-nuclear weapons and everything.
Interesting. Now, I also find it kind of interesting when you look up the list of the movies that the studio produced, and by Rotten Tomato scores, Takahata has the top 3 films out of the entire company, with Grave of the Fireflies, Only Yesterday, and The Tale of Princess Kaguya. I found that very interesting, considering the fact that Miyazaki's works are definitely the more well-known ones. Grave of the Fireflies is obviously well-known, especially in cinephile circles. But if I'm looking up a list of, best Studio Ghibli films, Only Yesterday, I never really saw come up. And, looking at some of the scores, or like people that have seen all of them, it always ranked very highly. So I was like, all right, I guess I'll check that one out compared to maybe some of the other ones. I didn't end up watching Howl's Moving Castle, or I didn't watch Princess Mononoke or stuff like that. So I watched Only Yesterday, and I am so glad I did, because that one really did hit me hard as well. Probably hit me a little bit harder than Grave of the Fireflies. And, this is about a story, just in the way the story is told. Obviously, the subject matter of Grave of the Fireflies is much more intense, and the moments in are very intense and sad, but the way Only Yesterday hit me personally, I found very interesting, because, it's about the story of a young girl growing up, and, I'm not a girl. I didn't have any sisters. She was the youngest sibling. I was the oldest sibling. She, wanted to go move out to the countryside. I couldn't be any further away from this character, yet for some reason, it's almost like when you get super specific about a character's descriptions and backgrounds and stories, it almost becomes more universal in that sense, because you can kind of be like, well, I'm not quite like that, but I can find something where I relate to, where I had a similar experience of being embarrassed or wanting something and I couldn't get it when I was a child and things like that. So just because of all that, it just really spoke to me for some reason.
Oh, that's so great.
Have you seen this one?
No, unfortunately. I realized that I haven't seen that many of Takahata's work, and now I'm like, oh Lord, I need to fix that.
Interesting,
but
yeah.
It's definitely on my list.
So this one I found very interesting, because it takes place in 2 timelines. One where it's present day and she's a young woman. It almost is a bit like an Ozu movie where people are asking her when she's going to get married. So it reminded me a bit of late spring. But then she also is claiming that her 5th grade self is with her on this journey. So it keeps flashing back to her. But what I liked about the artwork is every time it would go to a flashback, the whole screen would not be animated. It would be like whatever the characters are, and like the, if they're in their house, part of the room would be animated, but then the rest of it would just sort of drift into blank white space. And so I really liked it, because it basically felt like a memory. Whereas, if I was to be like, hey, can you tell me that time when you did this as a kid? And you'd be like, oh yes, I remember very intently what the chair I was sitting in, what the food I was eating, what the smell was, or something like that. But if you were to, be like, all right, now describe the rest of the atmosphere, you'd be like, I don't really remember. I think it was sunny. I think it was nice out. I don't really remember that sort of stuff. But, so I just really appreciate that the things that you can remember the most are very intense and vivid, and then the rest of it all just sort of fades away into the background. So I really like that sort of art style. And then, of course, when it was the present day, everything was fully and perfectly animated.
Mm-hmm. That shows Takahata's realistic, like how he is known, why he's known as being realistic and pursuing reality. That makes so much sense.
Mm-hmm. Now, I guess, are there any other non-Miyazaki or Takahata Ghibli works that you want to highlight? For me, the only other ones I've seen are When Marnie Was There, which was, I'm hopefully not going to butcher this too much, directed by Hiromasa Yonebayashi, and The Red Turtle, which was a co-production between Dutch studio Wild Bunch and Studio Ghibli, where the Japanese studio handled the animation process, making it technically not a fully fledged Studio Ghibli picture.
For me, as a child of Miyazaki, I love Ghibli. I love Studio Ghibli, but it's not Miyazaki. But Marnie, I heard that it's cute and it's on my list, but every single time I'm like, should I watch it? It's not Miyazaki, and I feel bad, but I should give a chance because I grew up with Ghibli and I believe in the studio, and everyone who's still working there, deserve their respect and spots and everything. So I really need to start watching non-Miyazaki and non-Takahata movies.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, it's one that I'm so on. The Red Turtle is really beautiful. It's almost completely a silent film, so it's very interesting. It doesn't feel like the other ones, even though it looks like a Studio Ghibli film, but it definitely has set itself apart.
Yeah.
So I guess, other than that sort of stuff, what are your sort of like overall thoughts on the way Studio Ghibli is maybe perceived in Japan compared to maybe the rest of the world, or like what's exactly its place over there?
It's just something that you grew up with. It's almost like a part of your life because in Japan, when you have a television in your house, you get a free cable channel, and one of those channels have weekly like movie night. Hours. So like Friday and Saturdays they show something, and they do Ghibli like every year. August specifically, they show Hotaru no Haka, Grave of Fireflies, because it's the end of the war, blah blah blah. But sometimes they do Spirited Away and everything. So if you have a television in Japan, you watch them. You grew up watching them. So it's just something that's become part of your life. And now with the rise of, social medias and everything, there's this actually a phenomenon. I forgot the title for a second. In Japanese, it's called Tenku no Shiro Rapita. The English title, Laputa, Castle in the Sky. So when that's airing wherever or whenever, people go on Twitter, and at this scene, the main characters say this old chant or spell, Barusu, and with them, people tweet Barusu. And I think they broke the Twitter server way back when, and it's a meme. It's just part of everyday life, and you just grow up Ghibli. Like you see, Totoro plushies everywhere, and I remember like singing Totoro's theme song back in elementary school. I'm pretty sure I can play that in piano and recorder. It's part of your life in Japan.
The theme song at the end where it's like Totoro, Totoro.
Yes, that one. It's so cute. I love that song so much. Even though I can't watch Totoro, there's a scene that traumatized me as a kid involving corn and goat or sheep. That traumatized me when I was really young, and I can't watch Totoro, but but I love the song, and I love Totoro and all those siblings. The characters.
Would you say that Totoro is the most well-known or the most beloved one in Japan?
Absolutely. Totoro's the one. Totoro's the face of Ghibli Studio, the theme sequence, and the face of Totoro Museum, Mitaka, in Mitaka, Tokyo. If you are ever in Japan, please go to Ghibli Museum. Apparently it's amazing. I haven't been, but they have the replica of the house from Totoro and everything, and apparently it's really cute. And I actually had a friend who lived in Mitaka and saw Miyazaki Hayao like several times. And she didn't say hi because she was scared of him. But yeah, Mitaka's a spot if you love Studio Ghibli.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I would love to go to Japan one day. And if I do, I will have to go and visit that museum, especially since, like, as I was saying before, I've barely seen any Studio Ghibli films. But now that I've seen a whole bunch of them, I'm definitely fully on board and hope to catch up with the rest of them.
Yeah, do it.
All right. So I think we need to pivot something deadly serious right now, and that is subs or dubs. I know Studio Ghibli is a favorite of young children who likely don't have the ability to read subtitles and as such grow up on the dubbed versions of these classic films, but where do you stand on them?
I'm 100% against dubs. I am sorry. No dubs. Subs all the way for me. What about you? Are we gonna have a war here?
No, I prefer subtitles always. I would rather watch any movie in its native language, the way it was intended by the creators behind it. So if at all possible, I will not watch a dubbed version. I just know that, like, here, especially in Canada, I'm sure in the US as well, but like, I know my cousins were big fans of Totoro growing up, and obviously they were not, listening to it in Japanese and reading the English subtitles when they were like 3 and 4 years old. So I know a lot of people in Canada really did grow up with the dubbing, and I think they probably try a little harder than maybe some other companies because they usually get some fairly big names to do it. I'm always sort of impressed where I'm like, I'm kind of curious. I'm like, ooh, what would it be like to listen to this movie with, a big Hollywood cast?
What is it?
Come on, let's go in. I want to see what's on the other side.
Where are you going?
You shouldn't be here. Get out of here now!
What?
You've got to get across the river. Go! I'll distract them.
When I did Netflix party with my friends, we watched Howl's Moving Castle, and first thing I said, like, it has to be in Japanese audio, and like we have to have subs. I know that, like you said, they do bring big names for dubs, and sometimes I'm like, ooh, I want to like listen to Mark Hamill, like, playing this character in the Ghibli film, like, oh, that sounds cute, but at the same time, it's like I just cannot do it. It's like my skin's just I'm getting goosebumps right now even thinking about it.
Interesting. Okay, well, I'm glad you said that because I do feel the same way as well. Obviously, it's a bit different when you have young children who possibly can't read and they don't speak Japanese. That's something a bit different. But yeah, as an adult, where I have the ability to choose which one, I am always going to choose the subtitled version.
All the way. Woohoo.
All right, let's talk about some non-Ghibli films. We've now basically spent a half an hour talking about just Studio Ghibli, but they are not the only producers of animation in Japan. A large amount of animated films, sort of much like Seven Samurai, which was, inspired by Westerns, but then went on to inspire just about every other Western after that, are inspired by science fiction movies, and then have gone on to be the inspiration for plenty of other science fiction, especially in Hollywood. You've got classics like Ghost in the Shell, which seems to take as much from Blade Runner as it then later gave to The Matrix and Avatar. Then you have the seminal film Akira from 1988, which is sort of seen as a gateway drug for other cultures to access anime and made the medium something that is not just for kids with its heavy themes and intense violence. It pulls minor influences from stuff like Star Wars, Blade Runner, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and more. But it's fascinating to see what is since inspired with the likes of Pokemon and Dragon Ball, The Dark Knight, Looper, and Stranger Things. When you have something like Paprika, which Christopher Nolan has had to explain that Inception is an homage and not a direct ripoff for years now, what are your thoughts on some of the more adult and science fiction themed films that have come out in the last few decades?
Huge fan of them. Ghost in the Shell holds a special place in my heart. Some of the franchise or the series are actually set in Kobe, my hometown. So whenever they talk about like Akashi or Kobe, I'm like, oh yeah, I know where that is. And Oshii Mamoru, the director of Ghost in the Shell series, does an amazing job creating this whole world that people may be able to imagine, but he takes it to the next level. And I just love him. And Kon Satoshi, he passed away way too soon. He is a treasure, and it's such a loss to the Japanese animation industry. But I actually just watched Paprika today. I only read the original novel and was like, you know what, I'm fine with this. And now I'm like, you know what? I'm glad that I watched it because it's amazing. And it shows what animation can do. And it breaks your imagination. It challenges you, this notion of reality. And those science fiction, kind of dark themed animation show that to you and provides this whole new realm and medium of self-expression. So a huge fan.
Wow, that's good to hear. Yeah, I quite enjoyed Paprika as well. Watching it, at the end of it, I was like, yeah, I think I kind of got what this movie was about. Like, I can tell you the general plot overview, but like some of the more specific themes and stuff it was touching on, it really goes deep with a lot of this stuff. And I think I'm forever going to be traumatized by that like marching band music. It's like a little...
Paprika's music is created by Shin Hirasawa. It was like a well-known kind of, not avant-garde, but he's not like mainstream pop music kind of person. So after listening to that music and kind of, I got scared too. And I was like, oh, it's by Hirasawa Shin. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, it's wacky and everything. Okay, I don't want to listen to it again, like maybe at night alone. But yeah.
What do you think is the reason behind there's so many sort of seminal science fiction anime movies? What specifically about those themes and genres do you think really speaks to some of the creators in Japan?
That is a really good question and a tough one to answer. Ooh, let me think.
Because is it like just a general subject that people in Japan are fascinated by? Are science fiction films, regardless of where they come from, is that something that is a genre that really interests, people that live in Japan?
If you are into anime, you kind of get used to the science fiction parts of the medium because like Gundam, robotics is a huge thing and people accept it as a whole new genre. And some people may like the genre or not, but it's just it's just a crucial pillar of the world of animation and people just accept it at this point. Like it's there. We grew up with that. And with the rise of interest and foreign interest in Japanese sci-fi and everything, I think people now realize that they can take it to a different realm and everything. So I think now they are at this point saying like, you know what, we can go back to sci-fi and do something different. We have amazing history of doing great shows and movies. So I think they're at that point. I may be completely off topic, but it's a genre that's been appreciated for sure. But it's just like unconsciously appreciated.
Interesting. Now, are there any other, big name films that you kind of want to talk about? I know I was sort of asking about any last minute recommendations, and ones that you had mentioned were Summer Wars and Jungle Emperor Leo. Are those ones that you have fondness for?
Japanese title, same. Summer Wars, directed by Hosoda Mamoru. Hosoda Mamoru is like a well-known director. He's all about family, and Summer Wars is just, I read the novel and I really liked it, and it's really cute. It's about kids going through some things, but it's not just kids, it's adults too, that they have their own lives. So it's this complexity of human being. I think Hosoda does an amazing job depicting it. And Jungle Emperor Leo, Jungle Teikoku Leo, that's actually based on a comic series. I think it's the same title by one of the most popular comic artists in Japan, Tezuka Osamu. And because of that, it's like iconic. And I remember, I don't think I watched the full movie, but I remember watching like clips of it when I was young, and it was cute. So I liked it, and then I realized that like, oh, Lion King, the Disney one, kind of ripped, this movie off. So I'm like, oh, okay. Now I need to appreciate it and like fight for Jungle Emperor Leo.
Interesting. Yeah, I know. It's always so shocking when people learn that like Kimba the White Lion is literally Lion King ripped it off like shot for shot.
Yeah, like why are you doing it? Ugh.
Yeah,
I still like Lion King, but heartbreaking.
I won't tell anyone. Now, I'm quite passionate about the Oscars. I'm about to kick off a 2-month series of episodes covering this year's ceremony. But back in 2002, the second year the Best Animated Feature category was a thing, Spirited Away won the award, making it the only time a film not in English won the top prize. Since then, Howl's Moving Castle, The Wind Rises, The Tale of Princess Kaguya, When Marnie Was There, The Red Turtle, Mirai have represented Japan at the Oscars. Despite Studio Ghibli having the 4th most total nominations in the history of the category, it has unfortunately been dominated by Pixar with 10 wins and Disney with 3, with 5 studios only having 1 win apiece. How do you sort of feel about this, the category and the lack of wins from outside of America, or even other international studios like Cartoon Saloon, Les Armatures, and Aardman have the same amount of combined wins as Ghibli?
I feel offended. I'm kidding. Not really. I mean, like for me, Oscars just like, I have my own opinions regarding that whole scheme, but like as a fan of Japanese animation, I'm like, y'all can do it. Like just fix your marketing, like go hard outside of Japan and you can win this. Like you can show the world that we got this kind of thing. So I'm really bitter.
No, that's fair. And for me, as much as I love the Oscars, the animated feature is basically the only category where I kind of think it's complete BS, because the way the Oscars work is you basically have to be a member of a branch. So the actors vote on the acting awards and the directors vote on the directing awards and stuff like that. And so animators vote on the animation award. And because the Oscars is an American organization, it means most of the voters are American animators, which the biggest studio is Disney Pixar. So most of the nominating members are employees of those two companies, which, have won 13 of, I think it's now 17 or 18 awards, something like that. So that's why, in my opinion, like I love Pixar. They make some fantastic ones, and a lot of them have been very deserving. But the fact that, there's almost, it seems like there's one token nominee that's not made by an American studio a year, whether it's Cartoon Saloon, which is based in Ireland. They're sort of the big one, or Aardman, which is the English studio that makes Wallace and Gromit, where it's like, you get one nominee. It's either a Ghibli or a Cartoon Saloon. Like take your pick of which one it's going to be, and that's it. And they stand no chance of winning, which is very frustrating to me, because very often they're doing more cutting edge things and more unique things. I'd rather watch a film that's, not technically perfect, like some of the Pixar ones, compared to maybe one that has a little bit more passion.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, that's good. Now, I'm sort of interested to know how animated films are marketed and received in Japan. I know, there's a worldwide audience for them, but are they just as popular as sort of like the Disney and Pixar movies are here, or are they more niche?
That's a tough question to answer, but okay, so when we are talking about animation films, there are 2 types of animation films. One is completely original animation films like Hosoda Mamoru, Kon Satoshi, or Shinkai Makoto, who did Your Name, Weathering with You. And the other branch is animation series based on comic series or video games or like actual like TV animation series. So for those the latter branch animation movies with like original comic series, they've been employing this thing called Volume Zero tactics. So to explain that, I was actually in this phenomenon back in high school. So there's this,
セ series called One Piece. In Japan, it's 1 season. 1 season. 1 episode. 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 1 episode
Origins is comic book series, and they have TV animation series, and that animation series has been going on and on because it's a long comic series. It's still ongoing, and every year that series comes out with a new movie. And so One Piece had like a few years of struggling with their movie. They didn't make as much money as they wanted to. So one year they said, you know what, for this year's One Piece movie, we are going to give out this comic book, like a volume 0 comic book to those who come and watch this movie. And it was limited. So the volumes were limited. So all the fans, including myself, rushed to the theater to get that comic because the comic, that volume, specific volume made for this film, was not going to be sold. So we all went, and it was a huge success. So after that, all the movies, animation movies based off of animation series or comics, they usually employ this tactic. And I think Demon Slayer, the movie that beat the Spirited Away box revenue record in Japan last year, did the same thing. They came out with the original comic volume for those who see the movie, who go and watch the movie. I'm not saying that Demon Slayer only was able to beat this monumental record of Spirited Away, but it still played in. And there are actually other films, like animation television series became movie, and they usually hand out the films, actual films that they use in the film movie. So, and it's all random. So sometimes they get scenes of this completely random, like almost like too dark, you don't get to see what's going on, or you get films of your favorite character in. So people go back to theaters to get films that they want. So they've been kind of employing this unique marketing tactic. It's been very, very working in their favor.
Wow. That's very fascinating to hear. Does this really help make these movies like top the box office, and maybe how do they sort of compare to some American films? Like are they as popular as American films?
Sometimes, yeah. Well, the reason that they come up with the animation movies is because they know that they have fans from the comic series or the television series. So they're like, okay, let's make money. Come on, get coming, basically, like, drop your money. And funny thing is that when Avengers Infinity War came out, that topped, pretty much number one in every country, right? Except for Japan, because
it made like $1 trillion.
Yeah. It made that much money, but in Japan, it didn't hit number one because at that time, there's this movie based on this animation series called Case Closed. It's basically like kids detective kind of story, and that series has been going on. It's ongoing, and that movie came out with that animation television series came out with a movie around the same time, actually like few weeks, maybe a couple weeks before Infinity War hit the screen. And that movie beat Avengers Infinity War. So Japan got shocked too. It was like, oh my God, like our, animation beat Disney, like Avengers, MCU, what the hell? And Disney, like North American fans are like, wait. Infinity War didn't win like every country's box office. Like, what the hell? So it was like, I was shocked too. I was like, oh my God. I used to watch this series, Case Closed, but I wasn't expecting the movie to beat Avengers. So it's like, oh my God. So it's like Japanese marketing, like film marketing is really weird. Like, you never know what hits hard. And the companies are doing their own things like the volume 0 tactics to make sure that they attract, as many audiences as possible.
Interesting. Are you able to sort of keep up with a lot of this stuff while you're living here in Canada? Or do you sort of find yourself being like, all right, what did I miss over the last 2 years?
basically that. I'm not that into animation anymore because I don't want to generalize it, but there's some xenophobic, misogynistic, kind of politically incorrect depiction of certain things. So I've been kind of away from that thing, but there are some movies of animation series that I used to watch and want to watch, but that means I have to go to Cineplex on Yonge and Dundas, which is like the worst Cineplex theater in Toronto. I don't know if you will agree with me or not, but I hate that theater. So it's like, I don't want to go. So I try to like wait for the release, but it's like, I can't keep up with them. I gotta wait.
I'm personally much more partial to Varsity Cinema. That's my favorite.
Me too. I love that place.
We'll have to, once everything opens back up, we'll have to go and see a movie together then.
Yes.
All right. The last main subject I sort of want to touch on is sort of similar to the one we talked about in part 1, and that's the idea of American films that take place in Japan. Off the top of my head, there were 2 recent examples, both stop-motion animated films that use the backdrop and legacy of Japan to tell their stories. You have Wes Anderson's 2018 film Isle of Dogs, about a pack of dogs trying to find their way back to their humans in Japan.
The Japanese archipelago, 20 years in the future. Canine saturation has reached epidemic proportions. An outbreak of dog flu rips through the city of Megasaki. Mayor Kobayashi issues emergency orders, calling for a hasty quarantine. Trash Island becomes an exiled colony. The Isle of Dogs.
In 2016's Leica Studios film Kubo and the Two Strings that blends together traditional Japanese mythology to tell the story of a young boy trying to find out the story of his father. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these movies if you've seen them, ones that I know that also have their own controversies as well.
So, Wes Anderson, Isle of Dog, I have a thing for non-Japanese people trying to create their own Japan and tell stories within. So I was like, I can't go watch it and get disappointed. My friend did and told me the plot line, and I was glad that I didn't go and watch it. But in Japan, I think it was well received, and people are like, "Oh my God, Wes Anderson's like talking about Japan, like made a movie based in Japan, like oh my God, that's so cool." So it was well received. So I'm glad for those people who like the movie in Japan, and for Wes Anderson, Kubo the same thing. It's like I'm not saying that the movie itself is bad, but I've just had horrible experiences before, so I can't really go into watch it. But I remember seeing some tweets about Kubo, and people were like, "This is actually a really good film. Like, y'all should go watch it." So again, this movie was well received in Japan. So maybe I should just like shed my own fear and just go into those films.
Yeah, I think both of them are slightly flawed movies. I love stop motion. I'm a real sucker for it. Especially the animation in Kubo and the Two Strings is absolutely stunning. Leica is my favorite studio. But both of them I feel have their own flaws. For me, it's the ending of Kubo and the Two Strings, and for Isle of Dogs, it's just certain parts that don't fully work for me, even if it's great overall.
Okay.
My name is Kubo. I look after my mother mostly. What was father like?
He was just like you. Strong and so handsome.
Ugh, mother. I use magic to tell stories. If you must blink, do it now. About epic battles, warriors, and monsters. But I had no idea my stories were actually true.
We've been looking for you for so long.
They're interesting, and I think that the biggest thing happens to be that behind the controversies is the casting of white people in the leads. Like with Kubo, they are playing Japanese people, and the leads are voiced by Charlize Theron and Matthew McConaughey. And in Isle of Dogs, I can't remember who it is. I think it's Greta Gerwig, who plays a young woman who's a student, who's white, but plays a student in Japan, and sort of taking over and leading the charge and leading her Japanese classmates and things like that. So that's what I recall as being like the bigger controversies between those two films.
Yeah, now after hearing that, I'm like, ooh, but being politically correct and the whole idea of like, okay, if give the role to the person who has the background of the character is not well received in Japan. It's like even a couple of days ago, like there was a whole feud on Twitter on the topic of this, and people saying like, oh, like if you're an actor, you should be able to play like any roles. So like, why are they limiting like, for example, like a transgender woman's role to transgender woman? Like, why are they doing that? Blah blah blah. And I'm just like, you know, in my own apartment in Toronto, just like, oh my God, they are not understanding the whole notion of it. So they actually don't even, I'm not judging them. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just unfortunate for me because, yeah, it is. It's just, it's like, y'all can be mad at those things. Like, we should be representing Asian, I mean, we should be demanding Asian representation. And say Japan's Japan, China's China, Korea's Korea, like give us the opportunity and do it right. So it's unfortunate that Japan's not seeing that topic from my perspective, but I think that's one of the reasons that those movies were well received in Japan without having that whole conversation and controversy taking place within that nation.
Okay. Now, are there any sort of final, animation films that you want to shout out as ones that your favorites that we didn't get a chance to talk about at all?
Yes. Miss Hokusai Sarasuberi is about daughter of Katsushika Hokusai, one of the most famous ukiyo-e artists. If you have seen that artwork of the Mount Fuji in the background and the whole ocean kind of wave kind of going really crazy, that's the guy. This film is about his daughter, who is also an ukiyo-e artist. And for me, Japanese animation has this big flaw of not understanding female, as in like anatomically speaking. Sometimes, female bodies are really off crazy in weird Japanese animes and like women's rights kind of thing. So to see women the way they are in this film was really refreshing. And that, like, I think I watched this film right after watching some of the Shinkai Makoto's work, like Kimi no Na wa Your Name, which I dislike that guy so much. If you like him, I'm sorry. This is just my opinion. He creates a beautiful world, but he's just a bit too ignorant when it comes to gender equality and things within his film. So I was like, okay, yeah, I hate Shinkai Makoto. And then I watched Miss Hokusai, and I was like, this is great. Like, I love her. And her story is often not told, even in Japan. So to get a spotlight for her, I was like, yes, girl, you go. And the artwork is beautiful too. It's almost a bit Ghibli-like, but it's still beautiful. And I don't think any of my friends have seen it. So yeah, if you are into it, if you're curious, go watch Miss Hokusai. I recommend that film to everyone.
Well, that is fantastic. I think that about wraps up our epic 2-part series celebrating Japanese cinema. Naomi, I want to thank you for joining me on the show and sharing so much insight. I hope everyone learned and enjoyed listening to this episode as I did making it with you. If people want to follow your work, what is the best way to find and follow you?
Find me on YouTube. Just search my name, Naomi Wada Platt, Platt, and you will see me there.
Well, great. I will link to that in the show notes. Stay tuned for next week when we react to the Oscar nominations that come out on March 15th. What movies will be in contention for Best Picture? Let us know what your favorite Japanese animated films are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at ContraZoomPod, and what other film cultures should we celebrate on future episodes. Send an email to ContraZoomPod@gmail.com. Make sure to visit ContraZoomPod.com for all your CZP needs. Today's show is presented by Aesthetic Magazine. Thank you to Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music and to Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. If you could rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts, it will be a huge help for us to grow and find new listeners. Thanks for listening.